right, let's get it. Welcome to Chatting with Chief, hosted by Backpack Technologies LLC, a place where we talk about some of the hottest buzzwords and concerns in the IT and cyber worlds. Today's guest is retired Marine First Sergeant Gayle Anders, and Gayle serves as the Global Business Continuity Program Manager at Netflix. And I'm your host, Jason from Backpack Technologies LLC. Some of Gayle's assignments translates into the Director of Crisis and Emergency Management, Director of Safety and Incident Management, and Coordinator of Continuity of Operations and Planning, or COOP, at various duty stations. Very impressive background, and I'm sure we got the right guy. So today's topics focus on understanding the elements that keep your organization operating and what it takes to maintain that level of operation and commitment. And I'm talking about business continuity management. And let me tell you, IT and cyber are just a part of the plan. But before we jump right into that, let's meet today's guest. Gayle, buddy, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. Thank you for having me on the show, Jason.
Hey, no problem. I'm just happy that you agreed to come on. So, can you introduce yourself a little bit more than what I did, and tell us a little bit more about your role at Netflix?
No, absolutely. So, Gayle Anders is my name. 20 years in the Marine Corps, primarily MOS for the veterans out of there. I was infantry by trade, and then I transitioned out of the Marine Corps at 20 years. Got my master's degree in emergency management, and I was going to pursue emergency management, but then I found out about business continuity, which I felt was more closely aligned with my military experience. And I got my certifications, and now I currently manage the business continuity program for Netflix, which is a global program.
Okay, cool. So you kind of already answered this first question that I had, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Maybe I can kind of spin it in a different direction, right? So, what in your background and experience, right, that led you to business continuity?
So there's different components of business continuity program, leadership buy-in, executive engagement, for lack of better terms, risk management, incident management, business continuity of critical or essential functions, and everything that I did in the infantry as we were, preparing for deployments and things of that nature. One of the easiest things that come to mind is succession of command. We were always taught 2 levels up in the Marine Corps, so essentially not only do I have to know my job, I have to know my boss's job, and I have to know my boss's boss's job. But what we look at is, we talk about succession of command, but that also relates to the succession of critical activities, or mission essential functions, is more of a military appropriate term. And so all of that continuity, preparing and planning and organizing and strategic conversations that we were having was very much in line with what I currently do. And for anybody else that's in business continuity, you're looking at those things that are critical to the business, and then ensuring that they have a high availability, or that they can withstand potential disruptions that may occur. So that when they do occur, you're not down for a period of time, because we've already thought through this. So we just activate the plan and we get things back to an available state as fast as possible.
I can see it. I can understand how that can be, critical, especially being I wasn't in infantry when I was in. I don't even try to play like I was, right? But when somebody does go down, or you got a plan for, well, we used to say if somebody gets hit by a bus, how are we going to continue to work, right? So I guess in your line of work in the Marines, that actually was actually a real true scenario that you actually had to plan for, which is very interesting. I just never thought about it that way. So so you kind of gave me the definitions and some of the key components of it. So what are like some of the main objectives that you look for in a continuity plan?
Yeah. So the first thing is to figure out what's important to the business, and I feel like there's a number of different ways you can get to that conclusion. Maybe a leader or an executive for the business tells you, hey, this is very critical to the business, whether it's a specific business unit or a piece of intellectual property or whatever the case may be. That's one way. Risk, if you look at the top 5 risks that any business is tracking, or the board of directors is presenting, those are all usually clearly articulated and documented. So you can use one of those risks and figure out which part of the business is affected if one of those risks actually occur. And then anything that, if you don't have context for either one of those first 2 things, I look at where do we get our money from? So at Netflix, we get our money from people paying for a subscription to view content from their home. So I work very closely with a lot of different engineers within the company to figure out, hey, what are all the things that support streaming? And then we conduct continuity assessments on those to identify these services have to have high availability, and what is the actual impact if one of these things goes down? And it's important to understand the impact, because if it's high impact and high likelihood, then you may want to invest a little bit more in the resiliency or the continuity of that specific piece of technology to ensure that the customer is unaffected by potential disruptions.
Say what stakeholder, right? They believe that one of their priorities is a priority, but part of the plan is probably not. How do you tell them that, that's not really part of the plan?
Well, I feel like it's important to define criticality, right? And one of the things you can use to define criticality is what kind of impacts concern you the most. So, a potential impact may be something that affects the company's reputation, something that causes us to lose our competitive advantage within the market. It could be a fiscal impact or a legal or regulatory impact. So once you identify the potential impacts that are most relevant to your business, because every business has different risk appetites, right? Some, for an example, Disney's very, very, very concerned about reputation because they deal with children and they deal with cruise ships and they deal with public amusement parks and all these other things. So a reputation for Disney is extremely important. Whereas Netflix, we can take, we've had some very, how do you say? We've had some content that did not make a lot of people happy, but we still show that different types of content, right? And
Right.
because our viewers get to decide what they want to watch. So to us, when we show different types of content on our streaming platform, even if we get negative feedback, the reputation is there's plenty of options. You don't have to watch this one. So I say all that to say, like, you have to identify like what types of impacts are most relevant to your business, and then define criticality, right? So for us, criticality is number one, anything that affects streaming path. If I worked for Amazon or I worked for some a different type of company that manufactures goods, maybe the criticality is supply chain. Anything, we cannot have a disruption in our supply chain. So anything that's affected by the supply chain has the highest level of criticality. So when you meet a different business unit and they say, hey, listen, I'm the highest level of criticality. They hired me for a reason. Like, this is the most important thing to the business. If we use the shipping supply chain, hey, listen, this business vertical has nothing to do with supply chain. And the boss has already said that if it doesn't have something to do with supply chain, then it's not the highest level of criticality. And it's through that education and awareness. And you have to take leaders along a journey, right? Because, if I'm the treasurer for a company, of course, I believe I own the bank, so to speak, for the business. So, of course, I believe that I'm very, very important. But when you walk through the actual impact of treasury not doing treasury things, what is the impact, right? Do we lose brand recognition with our customers? Do we roll into fiscal impacts and regulatory penalties, things of that nature? So it's a bit of an education thing as you go along this journey with these different leaders for the different areas. But as you refine the definition of criticality, you want to sustain that same definition across all business verticals. So there's a starting point. And the way that I do things here, I would do it a little bit differently at a Walmart or a Nike, because they have different priorities and they have different ways of delivering products to their customers.
Well, I mean, would you agree with this? Like, understanding your company's baseline, understanding exactly what makes the company run and how to maintain that, right? And then, once these new elements come in, I mean, I don't envy you really, but it's like you have to figure out exactly where they fit and rack and stack them, and then you just gotta let them know. That's crazy. That's crazy. Um, so what are some of the current trends and challenges that's coming along with business continuity?
Yeah, so I can tell you right now the geopolitical climate that's going on out there in the world. Obviously, we have the Russia-Ukraine conflict going on. We have the Palestine and Israel conflict going on. We now have the Houthi rebels, if I may have mispronounced that, out of Yemen, that have essentially shut down the Red Sea. So for Netflix, none of this really impacts us, but for my peers in different businesses and different organizations, it is absolutely front of mind for them, because losing access to the Red Sea, losing access to the Suez Canal has absolute implications on how fast you get your goods if you rely on any of those access corridors for the delivery of your goods, or you need this block to be in place before this block can be built, or whatever that thing may be. But the current, that's front of mind because we have no idea how bad things can get. You throw on top of that government sanctions. Okay, we can no longer do business with this country, um, or anything that's going to impair your business operations that are outside of your control as an organization because you're relying on the stability of that region in order for you to conduct business. So I feel like that's front of mind for a lot of us as we try to anticipate how these different things around the world are going to impact us here at home.
No, that's so key. When you said that, right? All these different world events that's happening, just like when we had COVID and how that supply chain was impacted by, just because of COVID. I mean, the world shut down and these other companies, if they didn't have anything in place or if they all they did was rely on certain things from a certain country. I don't want to really put any names out there. Their business was greatly set back. So how does business continuity differ from disaster recovery?
Yeah, so business continuity is very much focused on the business processes, procedures. If you're a publicly traded company, obviously there's a department within your finance area that does all the communication and documentation for SEC, 8Ks, 10Ks, those annual and quarterly reporting requirements for different events. Those are the kind of things that I'm focused on, right? Because I want to maintain the integrity of the business and make sure that we're able to do business. Where disaster recovery comes in is what I would maybe somebody would feel a little bit differently. But I look at disaster recovery first in data, right? Who owns our data? Where's our data being held? Are we doing backups, right? So what I mean by backups, for those that don't know, is you want to make a copy of all of your backups as you're collecting data and payments, for example. Like there's millions of payments that happen every second of every day around the world for the companies like Visa and Mastercard. How often they do their backups is very important. If you do your backups once every 24 hours and you experience a disruption and you lose 24 hours of data, like does that impact you? Is that significant to you? Like, do you have any other way of getting that data back? Or does your RPO, recovery point objective, have to be a lot tighter? Maybe 2 hours, maybe 5 minutes, maybe depending on the industry and what we're talking about here. The second part of disaster recovery is technology, right? So if the power is out and the internet is out, if those are not in your control, then I wouldn't account for those in a DR plan. But maybe your internal network, right? Your intranet of how your employees communicate between their different internal communication things. For Netflix, disaster recovery is a very big critical aspect. And essentially, if we experience a disruption, what do we have to fix first? So in regards to technology, software, services, applications, which ones do we have to stand up first so that we can stand up the rest of the environment or the rest of the ecosystem? That is a very, very technical component in regards to disaster recovery, whereas business continuity is not so technical, right? Because we're dealing with the people, we're dealing with the critical functions, essential functions for the business. So that's where the line in the sand is really drawn, right? I'm not, as a business continuity person, I'm working very, very closely with the DR team because I feel like they complement each other, right? The DR team needs to understand, what services or applications are most critical to the business, and that's where I connect the dots between those two disciplines. But we mutually complement each other. I don't believe one is more than the other. I do know that some of my peers feel a little bit differently. They feel like DR is more than BC and business continuity supersedes DR. I feel like you have to have both in order to maintain the integrity of your business.
Yeah, I mean, if you bring up, I mean, you okay, you put a house back together, right? I mean, but it's still not a home, right? You still not running. I mean, you still got to put the family back in there. The rules still got to apply. I'm oversimplifying it, but disaster recovery, you got to have a plan in order to recover from the disaster, right?
Right.
In order to continue to get to a normal state of operations, right? I agree with you, Gail. 100. I think they complement each other, especially after everything that I read. Speaking of reading, right? I'm gonna kind of go a little bit different than what I normally do and read this question verbatim, right? Because it got a couple of twists in it, right? So, I know conducting a business impact analysis plays a part. So, how do you conduct that along with the risk assessment to identify the critical functions and processes of your business and potential threats and vulnerabilities that they face?
Yeah. So for where I currently sit right now, risk is a an adjacent team to the business continuity team. So for risk assessments, it's not necessarily me conducting the risk assessments. However, if I uncover a part of the business that maybe a risk assessment has not been done on, then I'll communicate with our risk team and say, hey, listen, do you have any homework or research or data for this specific business vertical that may enable or inform my business impact analysis is to regards of, the criticality of this thing, the impact if it's broken or unavailable. So I partner with them, but what I love about our risk team is the risk quantification. Money matters to every single buddy. But to my earlier point about risk appetite, in the Marine Corps, if I lost $5,000, like my career's over and they're going to kick me out, right? At Netflix, if we lose $5,000, like, okay, like, was it malicious? If it wasn't malicious or illegal, okay, we're just going to write that off and we're going to keep moving forward because the risk appetite doesn't apply. Now, why does that matter? If your company has a high risk appetite and you're talking in the thousands of dollars when they speak in the multi-million dollars as far as revenue loss or impact and things like that, that's where the risk team has really been helpful for me because they've already quantified the potential impacts of what is the physical impact of this thing breaking or this event occurring. So I take that data and I use it to support my business impact analysis as regards to the criticality, because you can use monetary impact to essentially add value to the criticality levels you're assigned to these different business functions.
Nice. So, all right, Gayle, man, you've been great. So, how can people learn a little bit more about what you do and get in contact with you? Do you have any? Can you share any information out that you have?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'll be honest with you. That's pretty much the only social media that I use. So LinkedIn, you can find me. I'm Gayle Anders. I work for Netflix. I'm pretty easy to find on the software there or the website there.
And Gayle, again, man, thanks for meeting with me. It's been, dude, I love this conversation. I do want to know more about it. I'll probably reach out to you on the side, but especially with some of my assignments that I had when I was in the military, right? So we've kind of talked about this stuff, but I never was the guy or gal that was doing that type of planning, right? I provided input, but I wasn't that person. So I always thought it was cool. So again, thanks, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
I appreciate you, Jason. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.